Hello and welcome to this video where we have been talking about code review and the process of looking at pull requests and providing feedback. And in this video, we're going to explicitly talk about that feedback. What is the etiquette for review? How can we make sure that we give constructive code review feedback that addresses the code without attacking the author and be professional? So we're also going to look a little bit at the GitHub review UI to make sure we know our way around the page. So explicitly here, what are we going to cover? One, why feedback culture kind of breaks or makes a team. Again, we want to be able to give constructive code review feedback that actually addresses the code without making people feel bad, hurting feelings, and attacking the author. We also want to learn how to receive and respond to feedback professionally. We want to look at the GitHub pull request review tools and look at things like how do I leave inline comments, how do I submit a review, approve or request changes, and a little bit of a checklist on kind of just how do we structure our review so that we make sure we kind of check all the boxes. So the first thing we're going to talk about is feedback culture, right? Because feedback culture matters. And when we have this culture in our team of feedback, code review feedback that is happening in a tool like GitHub is generally permanent. It's going to live in that pull request thread forever. In a class environment, that might mean that it becomes part of a team grade and you're actually being graded on your communication. In a professional environment, of course, we want to make sure everyone is conducting themselves professionally, and leaving unprofessional comments in review feedback is probably going to hurt you with your team lead, your team culture, your HR. Depends on how rude you were. So in this case, it's often the first professional writing experience that many software developers have. How to give feedback shapes how your teammates are going to perceive you. And so getting this right is actually quite important. And not to judge too much into stereotypes, software developers don't tend to be the best at communication. And so if this is done poorly, code review often creates resentment, it slows teams down, but if done well, it is one of the more effective learning tools in software development because, as I talked about in the previous video, we often learn quite a bit about our code base, how to solve problems, and just the thought process and the logic that goes into code as we review other people's solutions. So the core principle that we always want to hang on to is that we are reviewing the code, and we are entirely divorced from the idea that we are reviewing the person. So every piece of feedback should be about a specific observable thing in the code and nothing about the author's ability, intelligence, effort, gender, or anything else that you might think you need to interject. So if it helps, we need to reframe. So instead of thinking, I'm finding problems with their code, maybe think about how you're helping make the code better before it goes into the shared code base that you also have to work with. Just make sure that you're keeping it not personal. So let's talk about how to give feedback with some more concrete examples. So the formula for a useful comment is going to be something like describe what you observed. So which line, which method, which behavior. We want to be specific about where and what we are seeing. Then explain why it matters. So, hey, this is an edge case, or if this input isn't valid, or what the consequence is, or what could go wrong. From your point of view, the way you understand it, from the way you understand the problem that's being addressed, explain why you have an issue here. And then we suggest a direction if possible. What you would consider as an alternative, not always possible to do, but if you are able to kind of helpfully guide the conversation in a productive direction to fix the issue, then you're welcome to add that. But it's not, again, always possible. And then we often have this prefix nit. So nit comments are for if a comment is just kind of like a mild, minor thing. So like a style preference, a very small suggestion, something like that. We tag it so the author knows that like, hey, anything else I said would be like more of a priority. That's the blocker. But you could also add in a nit for nitpick if you had an additional small minor comment. So something like in the case of our library app could be like nit return ISBN could be ISBN, since the method name already makes it clear it's for returning, right? You're just kind of like nitpicking the naming. Or you might want to ask a question. And questions are sometimes more useful than a statement. So like, I'm not following the logic in total available copies. Is the intent to sum across all books or just ones currently available? And so that might be worth a comment just to clarify. So some examples of some things that I see that aren't helpful or useful, right? This is wrong. It doesn't tell me what or where or what you think is wrong, right? So again, we want to be very specific. So from that previous example, right, the guard uses less than 0 instead of less than equal to 0. A book with 0 copies can still be checked out. Should this be is available or not is available? Again, asking the question to kind of surface up the intent. Maybe we've misunderstood something, or this is the correct logic and you're misreading it, but like asking questions is often a good way to just kind of surface that up. Being kind of a attacking or extremely, the word I think I'm looking for is hostile. Putting in a comment that says, why would you do it this way, is just going to immediately put anybody on the defensive. So make sure that you're actually trying to be constructive and talk about the code. Then don't do really vague things like bad naming or this needs tests. Make sure to get in there and, you know, if it's something like a name issue, I would put a nit on that. But with a test like, hey, specifically find by ISBN with a missing ISBN, this needs a test because there's no test here for a null return case, right? Being very explicit and clear about what the problem is that you're seeing. So the opposite side of this coin is, how do we receive feedback? Because we also as humans tend to sometimes get a little bristly about the comments that we receive. Now, if people are being good commenters, then we shouldn't be getting anything like derogatory or that's making us feel personally bad. But some people take any form of criticism personally, which professionally we would want to work on. So receiving feedback gracefully and understanding how to improve is part of professional growth. So when someone reviews your code, we want to read their comments, all of them, the whole thing, before you respond to any of them, because sometimes later comments resolve any earlier confusion. So you might read a comment at first and then just be like, well, I already did that down below. And then you see down below that they put a comment that was like, oh, I wrote earlier about this and I see you did it here. So read everything before you respond. And then you have to come at it with a place of good intent. Just assume, even if it's written a little too pointily, that the reviewer is trying to help and not criticize you personally. And unless they have actually put some kind of like, why would a girl write code like this comment, right? That's just like obviously unprofessional. Just assume that they're coming from a good place the same way that you would. And then if you agree with a comment, you fix it and you respond in the way that you would say like fixed in, and then you would put the commit hash or like a done check, fixed check. But we always want to put like the commit hash in there so that it's very clear that this commit is fixing this specific thing that was called out, and you can use those like a checklist. If you don't agree, you can explain your reasoning. So a pull request thread is a conversation, not a verdict. At least that's the way it should be in professional coding. I know sometimes when you are working with open source projects, especially with very prickly maintainers or owners of those repos, sometimes they'll just like completely reject a pull request and the conversation is over. I don't like that. It's not great for growth. It's not great for just building goodwill in your community, but I'm not in charge of everything. So we do want it to be a conversation. And then don't take like silence or nothing as approval. If a reviewer hasn't looked at your pull request, and someone hasn't merged it or approved it or said anything, just follow up directly. You know, in your org, you might have Slack or something like that, or just send an email and see if like, you know, they're busy or they're out or they just haven't had a chance to get to it. But silence is not approval. What we don't want to do, well, we don't want to get defensive and say things like, well, it works, doesn't it? I mean, code review has a purpose, and so we're all working together towards the same purpose of code quality, and we're all going to participate in code review in a professional way. We don't want to ignore comments without acknowledging them. Even if you disagree, we need to acknowledge them, explain your reasoning, talk it through, see if you can compromise if it's a style issue, but don't argue in the pull request thread for more than one or two exchanges. If you really can't reach an agreement, then that's when I would try to talk it out directly, maybe have a meeting, summarize the conclusion, something like that. If it's the kind of org where you can have a face-to-face conversation, that's great, or like a Teams call or something like that. But creating pull request thread arguments that go on and on and on and on and on, just kind of make you look bad, makes everyone look bad. Your team hates them. It's going to spam up all the notifications, and it generally doesn't get what you're trying to accomplish. All right, so let's talk about how we actually do this in the GitHub UI. And so some key things that I just want to make sure we talk about. So when we're reviewing a pull request, we go into our team repo or our org's repo or wherever we're going to review this, open pull requests, and then if you need to create like a sample pull request, I'm going to show you a sample one that I created just so I can show you what it looks like. And then there'll be 3 tabs in here: conversation, commits, and files changed. So here's an example in this project that I have. So if we go to pull requests, sorry, wrong tab. There we go, pull requests. And then you can see the pull request that is available, and we can click on that. And then you can see some information first off about like who submitted the pull request, and if anyone has reviewed it. You can, like in a team environment, assign or label or add projects or milestones. There's all kinds of just like organizational data and stuff that you can do in here on the pull request page. But you can see the tabs here. We have conversation, commits. There's also checks. So later when we talk more about like automated checking, that's where you see this. And then files changed. So we can see right now there's no conversation. I opened this pull request on my own repo. There's no conversation. This particular branch that I'm merging into this pull request has 5 commits in it, and we can see 6 files changed. And so when we go to the files changed section, we can see all the files and all the changes that were made, and we can navigate through them over here on the side. So one of the things that we often do when we're doing a review is leave inline comments. So in that files change section, we can hover over a line number, and then we can click the plus and we can type comments directly onto those. So from that files changed window, you can see as I move my cursor over the code window, that little plus shows up. So if I wanted to make a comment about something in here, let's take a look and just grab, oh yeah, here. So like this test method is blank. And so we would start a review. And we always want to start a review instead of just commenting. If you were just going to leave one comment, then that's fine. But we want to go to start a review because that's going to batch all of our comments into one notification. Because if you just hit comment and then you go on to make 14 other comments, that poor person who opened this pull request is going to get 14 notifications. So if we start a review, then that's going to batch them until we are finished. Then if we didn't have any additional comments or we were done, we could also come over to the conversation section and we could add our comment down here and start that conversation that we want to have with the person who opened the pull request. And anyone who has access to the repo, who has access to pull requests, can join in these conversations. So once you are finished with all of your review, you can click review changes, and then depending on your level of permissions, you can maybe approve this pull request. If there are things that need to be done, you would say request changes, and that's what will kick that pull request back to the person who wrote it so they know that they need to make those changes. Or you could just log your review as comment, and it will let you write a little summary. So you will find that, go back to files changed, up here under the submit review section. So you can see that it will let me write a comment. Now I can't, based on the rules of this current repo, because I opened a pull request on my own repo, that I can't approve my own pull requests. It's against the rules because, again, every pull request needs 2 eyes and I'm only 1 eyes. It's my code and I'm trying to merge it. So I would need someone else who has permissions on this repo to come in and review this pull request before it could be approved. But I can leave comments on my own pull request, but I don't know why you would. But this is where you would find that. So then once a pull request is approved, all the changes have been made or there's no issues, you can merge it. So then you merge a pull request, you confirm that merge, and then you delete the branch. The button will be grayed out until all protection rules are met. So you can see with a very conflicting way that this repo is set up that I could merge my own pull request. This isn't grayed out. So there's a couple of options in here, but usually you just create a merge commit and then you would delete the branch that this belongs to and clean all of that up behind you. And that would take the code in these 5 commits and roll them up to main, because you can see we're moving from a branch called adding tests into a branch called main, and then that would merge everything up. So again, there are 3 different outcomes essentially to a review when you've completed one. So either you're just going to write a comment, say like I have thoughts, I'm not approving, or I don't feel like I don't have permission to approve, or I'm also not blocking. I'm not saying there's a problem. I just like have some questions or some suggestions, or I just want to comment. Then you can request changes. So if you've gone through and done a review and you're like, these are things that have to be addressed before I could merge this, it's blocked, the author has to respond and submit a new commit and address those. And then the reviewer would re-review and then could approve at that time. They could also come back and request more changes. And sometimes a pull request goes through this phase a couple of times before it gets approved. But if you've reviewed it, it's ready to merge, all the rules are met, then the merge button becomes available and you can merge. So some key takeaways here. Good code review really should be a habit. It gets easier and faster the more that you do it. And we have some kind of guidelines and etiquette around how we should do it, always remembering that we're reviewing the code and not the person. Every comment should be specific, explain why it matters, suggest a direction if possible, and keep it professional. Remember that it is good etiquette to use the starter review in order to batch comments and never add just a single comment on each line or you will spam the crap out of someone. There are 3 outcomes to a pull request, and as the author, you should respond to every comment, assume good intent, fix or explain, never ignore, and just always try to work from the same place that you would if you were the reviewer, and assume that everyone is working towards the idea of code quality. So what I like to see, once you know something, you use it. So every pull request that you make should be reflecting what you've learned in these 2 videos. From an instructor point of view, like, I read the review threads, and if I'm grading you, then they're part of your project communication grade. But really, it comes down to just professionalism and knowing how to conduct yourself in this environment. So if you are a professional software developer already and you're working in a code base and you have the ability to make pull requests, or you have the ability to review, or you are getting code feedback, this is really a lot of takeaways for you to just think about why we're doing this and how you can grow professionally so that you can move from the person getting feedback into the person who gives good feedback. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and as always, you can let me know if you have any questions, and I guess happy pull request.